Welcome to this Packet podcast with me, Kimaru, and my co host, Patrick CJ. And today we are honored to host a very, very great guest. The name is Emmanuel Taban. Emmanuel is a final year student at Yukon University, pursuing a bachelor's in arts in indigenous governance. He's a political commentator, a South Sudan national, and a resilient human. And in this episode, we will be talking about his early life, his experiences with displacement caused by the war in South Sudan, him resettling in Uganda, and the power of education, and his vision for the future. Emmanuel, we're excited to have you on the on the Sparkit podcast. Maybe you can say hello before we get started.
Hello, Kimaru and Patrick, and hello, viewers. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we're excited to have you here. Thank you so much for honoring this invite. Yes, I was checking through, as a political commentator, I was checking through your social media, and you say that because politics determines every aspect of our lives, it's like your slogan. And I do believe in that, particularly because I used to think that politics doesn't necessarily affect who we are, but it definitely affects every aspect of our lives. Anyway, we will definitely probably talk a little about that in this podcast. But before we even get to that, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your life before the war started in South Sudan.
Oh, great. Yeah, as you said, I'm a South Sudanese national, originally from South Sudan. That's how I identify, and I lived in South Sudan almost the entire of my life. Uh, but I think the moment that I really can recall where I feel I was existing was in 2005.
Mhm,
And in 2005, that's when I started my early school life. That's in primary.
mhm,
And there's a town in uh, that's bordering Uganda called Ye. I think that's where I and Patrick lived there. So
Yeah.
Ye is some kind of like a very, very, really interesting town, very cosmopolitan. It almost brings in every person from all the parts of the country, and like very great place. Um, that's where I lived almost entire for the whole of my life, like over I would say over 18 years. That's where I lived before, and then I lived with my mom most of the time. I never had a chance to live with my dad, and I grew up with my uncle, and like he just like I feel like he played every single role just like a dad would do, and I'm really really very happy that I had that privilege to live with my uncle. And in 2005, that was when I started my primary, and very exciting that also I and Patrick went to the same primary school. Uh, yeah, so
Yeah.
That's
uh,
interesting.
the school is
Mhm,
called Jigomoni Primary School, and it's a government school, by the way. And that's where I started from 2005. And in 2011, I completed my primary. I did my primary living examination, and by that time, I think we were doing still we're learning the Ugandan curriculum. So and that was the last year where students from South Sudan were doing the Ugandan curriculum in 2011. So in 2011, when I got done with my primary, uh, the following year I enrolled for my secondary level. That was in Excel. So Excel is like it has so many branches. There was one branch in a place called Morobo. There's one within Yei where we used to live, and there's one also in there was one in Mukaya. So Mukaya, it's like my home village. That's where my parents come from. My dad and mom, they both come from Mukaya. So there was a Excel had like a boarding branch in Mukaya. So that's where I went for my secondary school. I studied there, and in 2016 I completed my secondary school, and just like months after completion I enrolled for, because like I had when I was in secondary school I really fell in love with like journalism. I do a lot of writing, like I became a member of the journalism club in school. We write a lot of stories in school and present them during assembly. And I really became so much passionate about journalism. And I felt like that was the first thing that came into my mind. I was like, when I get done with secondary school, like I would want to go and do journalism. That was number one priority in my mind. So after completion of my secondary school in 2016, just like after a month, and I enrolled for a journalism course, journalism and radio presentation program, and that was in 2016. But even when I started my secondary school in 2012, just like the next year in 2013, that's when the war started in South Sudan on December 15, 2013. But uh, it was based mainly in the capital Juba, so it didn't escalate like to most parts of the country in 2013.
Okay.
So
Mm-hmm.
from 2013, 14, 15, and 16, I had the privilege to complete my secondary school. But then in 2016, when after my secondary and when I enrolled for the journalism training, that's when now the fight escalated to different parts of the country, and where I was living, me and Patrick were living, also became so much insecure. And I remember like when I was about to uh, get into my exams for the journalism and radio presentation training. Uh, it was, I think, like we just left with like a week to exams, and then the whole thing started in Yei.
Mhm.
So there were a lot of chaos, like targeted killings. People were killed at night, and so many stuff. So it really became so much insecure. Like, and most of the like kids were asked to stay at home. So schools were closed for that reason. And then I couldn't have the time like the to complete my training that I'd enrolled for. So in 2016, when my uncle and like the family, when they saw that things were not going right and it's not longer safe for us to be there, um, they decided that we leave the country for Uganda. And I remember the moment that actually sparked up that move, that my uncle became so much scared, was I remember this day when there's this great business guy who was in Yale, and that guy, there was one evening that some kind of chaos started in the town, and then that guy was shot dead. So I think that incident really,
I think
uh,
I know the guy.
yeah, like
Is
that
that
incident.
Romano?
That's the one. That's the guy. So
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah. He
incident,
was he was close to our studio,
yeah, right,
and the day he was shot, we were actually there.
right, yeah. So that day, my uncle's son was in town, and when that incident happened, he ran right away from town home, and he couldn't even stop on the compound, just rushed inside to his room. So we knew things were not right, and people were worried at home. And my uncle told us that now it's not safe for us to live there, so we had to live. But even when we were leaving for Uganda, we didn't know we were going to spend so much time, because we were just told, let's just go and stay there maybe for 2 or 3 weeks or a month, and then after that we'll come back. So that evening, I remember we started packing our things, and we couldn't even go with so much. We just went with a little of our belongings, like little clothing and some food stuff. And then I saw a vehicle the following morning, came home there, and yeah, like they told us, you're leaving for Uganda. I was kind of hesitant at the start because I really didn't want to go to Uganda, because I just completed my secondary school and I was enrolling for my journalism. I feel like I
Mm-hmm.
was on the right way, on the right track, really. So I didn't want really to leave the country, but my uncle said there's no way we're going to stay there, so we had to leave. So we left Yei, and then we traveled, and that day I think it took us like almost like 5 hours or six, like that. I can't remember exactly. And then the most interesting thing, when we reached the border, um, I mean the border Uganda and South Sudan, like in Kaya, that's when I noticed that a lot of people were leaving the country. Like when we reached the border, I felt like the whole of Ye, the town where I was living, was just there. So many people, so many people. So that's literally how I lived my life, my early life, and how I escaped Ye for Uganda. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's oh wow. Honestly, I don't even know what to say. I can only imagine sort of like how it must have felt to, know that you are stable, you are living somewhere, everything is working out all right. And then something just happens and sort of it changes the trajectory of your life. And now you have to sort of start over. How did it maybe feel for you to sort of leave these dreams behind, like the fact that you were already enrolled in a school, you're doing journalism, you're pursuing something you're passionate about, and now it's like you don't know what to expect, you're moving to another country, and everything sort of has been destabilized. How did sort of that feel for you at that point?
It really felt so scary because and one funny thing, by the way, that I always tell people, and they don't believe it sometimes, is that I I never stepped out of South Sudan since I was born until 2016. I never left the country. So right from when I was born until 2016, I lived my entire life in South Sudan. And also, I only visited the capital city like twice, and I even never had a chance to live there like for more than a month. So my entire life, I grew in Yei, and like when you stay in a place for a very long time, that means really a lot for you. You have a lot of, I mean, so much attachment to that place. That's where you have your childhood friends. That's where you started your life. You started your school, and just living such a place would like really means so much. And I felt like when I was leaving Yei for Uganda, I felt like I've just left all that I had behind. Like all the friends, the people I knew, the memories, everything. I felt like they were just left behind. It was scary at first, and but I used to hear stories about how our parents used to live in the refugee camp, and I can only imagine the life that they were going through. And I never expected that maybe at some point I was also going to live in the refugee camp. But when that time came and we had that chance to go and stay in the refugee camp, that's when now I really get to know what life in the refugee camp really feels. Yeah, but that moment leaving Yei for Uganda, it was scary and so emotional moment for me. Yeah.
Did you guys like have trouble at the border? Because I believe like maybe sometimes when there's a war happening in a neighboring country and people are trying to flee to the next country, maybe there's sort of issues. Did you experience anything, or it was just like a free pass to enter Uganda and they accommodate you in these
Oh,
circumstances?
I think so many people. I had stories from people who really experienced so much trouble when they were leaving the country. But I believe like maybe that's because like when we are living, I believe in God. Like we're all Christian, and we had really a very strong prayer that day when we are living, and we just surrendered our lives to God. We knew like it wasn't that safe for us to go from South Sudan to Uganda, but we just asked for God's protection, and I think maybe because of that prayer, there was really nothing that happened along the way. All we could see, like we saw soldiers along the way, like people holding guns, and like there's a town along the way, like another county called Morobo. Like we just find vehicles like burned and just the smoke going in that town, and it was really a very scary moment. But we successfully reached Uganda without facing any trouble along the way. Yeah. But there are so many stories from other people that were really so bad when they were leaving the country. They really experienced very, very, very bad moments.
Okay.
Right.
Wow.
Um, it was a very scary thing leaving. Like you, also, I left in 2016.
Right.
Yeah, I think probably maybe you guys left earlier, and I
Oh,
left like towards.
we left on the 20th, I think.
Yeah.
20th of July, 2016.
Oh, so I came after you guys.
Yeah, yeah.
It was scary.
It was, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that town that you mentioned, Morobo,
Yeah.
for me, when we were coming and we reached that place, there was an actual active fire.
Right.
Yeah, like between the government forces and the rebels, and it was just scary. We had no idea there was such a thing going on. So we
Mhm.
just came in like that. And I was driving at the time and I had my siblings and stuff, but man, it was so scary.
That was so bad, man.
Yeah,
I
so
can only
scary.
imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, that's it.
And so you mentioned um you've been in Yei for all your life.
Right.
And honestly, like you, I think for me it was really hard living Yei because I had also built like a very strong connection with Yei.
Right.
Growing up with you guys, building all these strong relationships, going to play soccer,
Right.
it was something you couldn't see yourself leave behind.
Right.
And and so I'm just wondering for you, um, since you had to flee this place that you've been living at all your life to now Uganda, how was it like adapting to this new place? What were maybe some of the biggest challenges that maybe you faced? Could be maybe cultural shock, or maybe academic challenges, because this is an entirely new place that you're moving to.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The most funniest thing with us living for Uganda is that like we didn't just go to Uganda maybe and start from a place where there was already set up, right? When we left on the 20th, we from the border we were taken to a transit. I think that was in Kerry. So there was like a big transit in Kerry where all the refugees at the border would be taken to Kerry, and then there's some kind of registration and all other stuff done there. And we stayed in Kerry like for a week. So after a week, like that's where you see so many people that you maybe had some of them your friends in school, and those that you live in the same area. But most of us met there, and that was a time when like you realized that something was really bad happening. And from Kerry, after 1 week, we were taken again to another transit that is in Ochea. So in
Mm,
Ochea, we stayed like for 3 days. Okay, we
yeah.
stayed for 3 days in Ochea, and from Ochea, after 3 days, that's where we're to be taken now to the how do you call it? Like those villages,
Mm,
those clusters where now you're going
yes.
to
The
start your
actual
lives there.
settlements.
Yeah, the settlements, right? So
Yeah.
so um so that day when they were taking us to the settlements, um, we were taken to a place where literally there's nothing. Just like you're seeing the real bush. Just like there's no any single house, or no single room there. So imagine that like we were only provided with tools like slashers and pangas and all those tools that you can use to maybe like erect your maybe hut or something like that. And I remember that day when we reached that place, that settlement, my grandmom just saw the area like that, and then she started like shedding tears. So it's like, just imagine we left everything. We were living in a good place. We were doing this, but now we're starting life from zero. So I feel like that's the first challenge that we really had, living a place where you already have like roof over yourself, you're already sleeping there, you have access to food, you have your kids going to school, your siblings going to school, and now you're going to start life from literally zero. There's no room that you're going to start. You have to go to the bush and cut all
Mhm.
those poles and go and look for grasses and install those rooms and all that. So I feel like that was the greatest challenge that we really had at the start. And also like when we left Ochia and we were taken to the settlement that night, like because we couldn't like make a house or a room in a day. So that night where we were just like sleeping outside, and that night there was heavy rain, that like, and there was no room. There was no room there. right? There was so what we did was because we had like we were provided with these tarpaulins, like big carpets, like two of them. So we put one down and just like all of us as a family just slept there, and then the one we covered on ourselves. So that day was really so, and I feel like everyone that day felt so bad. Really, I didn't see it, but I have a feeling that at least that day everyone cried because like
Mhm.
all the stuff we had were all washed with the rain and like all the clothing and everything, and you had no room even to sleep in. So
Mhm.
that was the first challenge that we had. And like when we lived like for almost weeks and months now, we started erecting houses there, and it came a time where now parents feels that their kids need to go to school, but also there were no schools around. Like this is just like a place you've just recently they brought you recently in, and the schools that they have are very far, and also you need to pay money. But most of these parents that came, they left behind their jobs and they have nothing. They have no money to go and take these kids to those schools, right? And the second challenge was now getting into school. It wasn't so easy.
Mhm.
And I remember when we left, like we stayed almost like for a year and a half from 2016. The whole of 2017, there was no one at our family that went to school. We all were home, not even a single kid. And 2018, um, that is when now I think UNHCR and other implementing agents like some NGOs started bringing in some ECDs like childhood education centers, and they started establishing some primary schools. But also the challenge was there were not even good people who could teach these kids in school, and they were only relying on people who probably like just left school there and who have that little knowledge just to go and train and teach these kids in school. So that was also
Mhm.
another challenge. And now for my case, since I completed my senior four, I like if I was in South Sudan, the other level where I would be looking for is now to go into the into campus. But like there was nowhere I could go there. And second of all, in 2016, I completed my senior four, but I didn't have like the transcript.
Mhm.
The transcript usually they come like after 1 year. So even when I come to Uganda, I had, even if there was a chance to get into school, I had no evidence that I completed my secondary school, right?
Okay.
So I stayed like for the whole 2017, and then in the start of 2018, that's when I called my uncle's son who lives in Juba, and he had to go to the Ministry of Education and look for my results. And when he sent, um, I now had the results, but now how to get into school was now the problem. There were refugee secondary schools in Uganda. At the camp, there was one called Wanyange Secondary School. I think that was established long time ago during
Yeah.
those years when these people went for refuge as well. But now the school also you have to pay money for it, right? And I had like an uncle who was taken to another refugee camp. So at least in that refugee camp, there were, I mean, they established schools, and there was also an advanced level, like A level, because in Uganda, like this ordinary and advanced level. So I I called my uncle who lives in Bidi Bidi refugee settlement, and I told him that I want to go to his place. So we went, and then I went and registered myself. I didn't even know I was going to stay there for long because
Mhm.
even that school, there were no facility. Like you know how people in advanced level are supposed to have. Like they're supposed to have all these, like these teachers and all libraries and all this, but these facilities were not there. So I just like, okay, let me just try this. So I went and I went and registered myself uh, uh, for advanced level in Bidi Bidi refugee settlement. That was like a UN funded school in Bidi
Mhm.
Bidi. I enrolled in my first year, 2018, for my senior five. And like and you know what I've learned is that I feel that when there is a challenge, when there is always a challenge that you're going through, that is when the best will come out of you. Because
Mm.
in 2018, when I enrolled for my senior five, I went to a school where we didn't have all the teachers. I was doing Heck is a combination where I did history, economics, and geography, but we were only taught history and geography, but economics, we had problems with that. And even other subjects as well, they were really challenged. There were no enough teachers who could teach in this subject. So I was like, okay, I just felt like this is a time where I really have to commit myself, right? And I stayed with my other uncle in Bidi. I went to his home. They provided me with a room, and they were really very nice people. And I stayed there almost for 2 years. And the most interesting thing is that when I was doing my advanced level, I dedicated my whole life for student service. I served in different clubs in the school. And that was
Mhm.
intentional because one, I really needed to build myself. I served in so many clubs. I was leading the Readers and Writers Club. I was leading the debating club. I was the head boy of the school. I was at some point like the before being the head boy, I was the academic prefect and all those. So I just wanted to keep myself so busy so that I wouldn't like have the time to just stress my mind with some other stuff that are not from school. So I dedicated myself. 2018, luckily, I had the chance to complete my advanced level. And though that was not the grade that I expected, but I feel like it was satisfactory from where I was studying, and really I so many people were proud of it. The school was proud of it. Even the district was proud of it. And my school that I studied in was one of the best in the district, and it was based in the refugee camp. And it was because we the students, we said, we know that we are in these settings and this is not going to limit us. I know we would have like the chance to as well go and study in these best schools, but it is not it's not that we just want to be here. I know we are here, but we're just going to make a difference and make these people believe that no matter where you study, if you want good grades, like, it doesn't mean you really have to go to these best schools in the cities and where you can get the results you want anywhere. So we had that in mind as a team. And I was very happy that my classmate had the same mind and they had the
Mhm.
same dedication. They knew where we came from and they knew where they want to go. They have that in their mind. And really, we ended up making the school proud as a cohort. And up to now, our school is so much proud of that. And that was just in the refugee camp. So that's
Wow.
how the challenge that we had turned into something exciting. And when I just got done with my A level, I felt that the way was open for me. So many stuff came into being, and I had access to so many opportunities in the refugee camp. And what I always tell people in the refugee camp is that opportunities always lies where people complain. You know, so many people have this notion in their mind that the schools in the refugee camp really don't provide, like they don't really deliver the best. But I always tell these guys that, if you are committed, if you know what you want to do, really it doesn't matter where you're doing it, you will achieve whatever one thing you want. So that's what I always tell my friends back then when we were in school, and they really believed in ourselves. And we had really a very, very great team. And I'm happy that most of them from my cohort, they all got scholarship and they studied they went to the best universities in Uganda, some of them in UCU, some of them in Bugema, all through scholarships that came to the refugee camp. And most of them, they even like most of them now, they're out of school, they graduated, they're working now. They came back to South Sudan and they're working, they're getting, and that's one thing that I was really proud. And if there's one lesson that I've learned from that, is that you don't have to limit yourself to any situation. You can do whatsoever thing that is out there as long as you believe in yourself.
Absolutely.
That's really inspiring, honestly. I like the fact that you are sort of very resilient in your journey and you didn't like sort of allow your circumstances to define where you are headed, whether it was at school, with leadership, at home, and all these things you are doing for yourself, for your family. That's really amazing, honestly. It shows just how much sometimes we can be resilient as human beings despite sort of like the circumstances we go through. So maybe did you have like other people helping you through this journey, especially when you are doing your advanced education? Did you have like either it was individuals or institutions like NGOs or a community like sort of come through for you?
Oh yeah, there are really so many people that help me in different ways, and 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 one of the greatest gifts that anyone will ever have is a family, right? So I feel like, you know, even when they were not in position to maybe financially, like finance my studies, because I went to a UN funded school where I didn't have to pay for anything. So I felt like the lessons that I got from my family during that time, they really kept me going, right? Because I remember my uncle would call us every evening and just talk to us and say, like, sometimes when people get into such situation, they become frustrated, and then they would just say that might be the end of your life, and you just resort to doing things that are not right. But always talk to us that this is not the end of your life, right?
Yeah,
There are so many things that are coming ahead of you. So I feel the best institution that I feel helped me was my family. My family was really, really great in helping me out, advising me and just giving me direction, right? And
yeah,
and that's one thing that I'll ever be proud of. My family helped me so much. And second of all, I also, I think, would maybe give my sincere appreciation to the church where I grew from, because like I since my like when in 2000 that in 2008, that's when I became an Adventist in 2008. And right from that time I felt like there was something different in me, because like the church really teaches so many lessons, and I feel like those lessons as well kept me safe. I in my like when Saturday comes, I could go to the church and just spend time with the church members and maybe do some church work. And I feel that time
Mhm.
also like prevents me from getting into some trouble. And we have like very great people in the church who would also talk to us and advise us. That's a very great one. And on the side of my education, of course, um, there are so many institutions that, I mean, some organizations that really helped us, especially when I was in my advanced level. The
yeah,
organization that was helping us was Window International. And then when I was in my final year, then FinCharge 8 came in. And this organization really played a very, very vital role in, uh, in taking care of us as students who were studying in these refugee settlements. They
yeah,
send people to us and just talk to us and have sessions with those students, like giving them hope. And that was one thing that I really uh, I'm proud of most of these organizations that helped us that time. But also, Helen, sometimes, you know, I also thank most of my teachers that were there, because um, they really helped us so much, even when the school didn't have like so much facilities to rely on. We
yeah.
had most of the teachers that were ready to help anytime, and they really played a very vital role as well in our lives. And I feel these are the people that really shaped our lives.
Yeah, I think that's like sort of the power of community, honestly. And we all need community at different types, different times of our lives. That's a really amazing thing to have happened.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Wow. You have such a very powerful story. Yeah. And it's a story that is rich, but it also, for me, shows the incredible level of resilience from
yeah,
you and the community that you were surrounded uh, by. And because it's not easy to
Right.
stay focused with all these kind of odds against you. It's like everything is set against you.
Right.
Yeah. Lacking facilities, or you're lacking like books, equipments that maybe you need to be able to study, and very many other things like that. But you kept yourself focused.
Right.
That is interesting. That is really brilliant.
Right.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to understand is, so when when you were studying in Bidibidi,
Right.
what was the name of the school?
It's called a Valley View.
Valley View. Oh, I know Valley View.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Valley View.
Yeah. So
Actually, Valley View.
mhm.
Because I was just informed that because of that the level of performance that the school like had in the previous years, actually the
Yeah.
school is now made as the role model and has now the best facilities, like has a
Yeah.
computer lab, has library, has a lot of good facilities. And it's now like where, initially when we would go for our finals, we were taken to one of the main schools in the district, like in Yumbe town. But
Mhm.
now, nowadays, I'm told like all the students from the refugee camp don't need to go anywhere. So most of the secondary school instead they will bring all their students and then do their exams at Valley View. So Valley View is now a
Wow.
role model school in the refugee settlement. So that was exciting
Wow.
news. Yeah.
That's exciting.
Right.
Amazing.
So it's also now an examination center.
Yeah, it is. It has now examination number. It is an
Wow,
exam.
that's fantastic. Yeah. I mean, because I understand you were probably studying with both refugees and hostel community members.
That's right.
Oh, was that not the case for you?
That's true. That's right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
how were some of the cultural challenges? Because I know, like, there are differences.
Oh yeah, and I think like there is really some kind of difference, but I didn't see that much because uh mainly the northern part of Uganda, I think they share a lot with South Sudan
Yes.
because we have so many guys who lives in the northern part. Like we have the Kakwas in Koboko. We have some also in South Sudan. We have the Madis and all those stuff. So when we were studying with those nationals,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they really had they understood our situation and also because they were most of the teachers that actually taught us they were Ugandan nationals.
Yeah.
So and most times these guys are taken for trainings on how they can deal with people like us, right? So
Right.
and I feel that those trainings that were given to these teachers because most of these organizations they realize the kind of people they are dealing with. These are people who
Mm-hmm.
comes displaced and probably might be living with a lot of trauma, and and also I feel that the training that was given to those teachers actually met them also to make us coexist in the school. They would have
Mm-hmm.
like a different sessions with us and ensure that the nationals and the refugee students coexist and that was one thing that I really learned. I didn't see uh, a lot of differences when I was studying in school. And in fact, most of the friends that we had were nationals in the schools, and they were really great people. They were
Mm-hmm.
able to understand our situation and just like just in fact it was even hard for one to differentiate the national and refugee in that school. So we were all in the same place, like going to the same class, and yeah, there was not really much difference between us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah. And also, honestly, I don't know what your thought is on this, particularly um, given that the northern part, in particular, Yumbe and Bidi Bidi in particular, when you look at that area, it's like one of those areas that is very marginalized.
Right.
The nationals, um, they they are most times struggling, just like the refugees are in so many cases.
That's true.
Yeah, and in some settlements, that has been like a cause for conflicts between the nationals and the refugees, and sometimes this conflict extends to even school, to like students. But it appears that in your case, it was different.
Hmm. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I think Bilibili really has like a very different setup because I was brought to Rhino refugee settlement, but
Yeah.
I went and studied in Bidi Bidi. So, for instance, like in Rhino, in the settlement where I was living in Rhino, like they really place us with the nationals together. Like you could see that
Right.
there's a refugee here and there's a national here. But
Right.
in Bidi Bidi, like entirely the whole settlement were just refugees, right? They were
Mhm.
refugees. And if I told they were nationals who were coming, they just came into the settlement. But they were not there at start. Initially, they were not there. They just came maybe because now they have seen that there are people here. There could be more opportunities, establish their own businesses so people can come and buy it. But they were not there at the start, which is the case in Rhino. So I've seen, when I was in Rhino, I've ever seen this kind of conflict that emerged between the refugees and settlement. And this comes mainly I think because of resources scarcity, because these people feels like these people are coming to our place and now, uh, like because when the refugees came there, when they were brought there, they have to go to these to the bush and look for this wood and cut their trees, and that's one thing that really angered these nationals. But also there are instances where these people felt that maybe um, the refugees were favored at some point, and that they were not really okay with that. When
Yeah.
someone comes to your place and you are struggling, and then you see that there's so much help coming to this person who is staying in your place, but you're not being helped. So I think that some of the conflict emerged at that at these points where the nationals feels that there is so much help coming from the organizations and UNHCR to the refugees could be in form of food ratio, in form of maybe some help that could be in form of cars that comes into them, or other small materials that are given to these refugees. And as human beings, we always have that heart of envy and other stuff. So I think it made them really feel so angry, and at that point, that's where the conflict comes from. But I didn't see that when I was studying in BDBD, but it happens often when I was in Rhino between the nationals and the refugees. Yeah, that happens. And it's just
Yeah.
because of the scarcity of resources.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I actually remember one case that happened in Vepi. You're probably even aware of this. There was a case where refugees were being resettled to in Vepi,
Hmm.
and then the host community members blocked the buses
Right.
that were taking the refugees.
So bad.
And it was a whole nother kind of a situation.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um,
That was so
but
bad.
eventually it was resolved. And the reason was the very issues that you raised that were basically causing like conflict between the host and the refugees that are being resettled
Right.
in their places. Yeah. Maybe back to our discussion. Uh, you've had such an experience from being forced to leave Yei in South Sudan, a place you've been living in for all of your life, to now coming to Uganda, where you have to start from zero, everything afresh, no roof over your head, and all this. What is the most important lesson that you have learned as a person throughout this process?
I think the biggest lesson I've learned from this is that, you know, sometimes it's important to just get back and start from nothing. It's really it gives you the momentum of going ahead. When you start completely from zero, when you get back to zero, like you start developing the passion of doing something great because you feel that you've left something that you've started and then you don't have anything. Now, just to reconcile that gap between what you have and what you don't have, you will put like more extra effort to make sure that you recover what you lost before in a very short time. So the biggest lesson I've learned here is that, it's okay to start from nothing again. No matter how much you've accumulated in whatsoever form, it's just okay to start from nothing. And
Mhm.
and sometimes we should actually believe that it is possible to just gain back what you lost within the shortest time. I mean, what you lost over time in a very short time, you know.
Right.
And also, what we should learn sometimes that, I always go with this saying that everything happens for a reason. You know, everything that we see happens for a reason. I remember, Patrick, when we were coming from that day when we were traveling from Uganda, um, from Arua to Kampala, so we could
Yeah.
come to Canada. I remember
Yeah.
our vehicle like broke down, right? And then
Yeah.
and that's one thing you told me.
Twice.
That's one thing you told me.
Twice.
Our vehicle
Yeah.
broke down when we were going to Kampala, and
Yeah.
I think they had to provide an alternative vehicle. But then it was too late that we couldn't use like the user road to go to Kampala, so they had to take us through a game park, and that
Yes.
was really an exciting moment that day. So
Yeah.
like that time we were able to see, like, in fact, I had never had the chance to go to a game park and saw those amazing animals. But
Yeah.
when our car broke down and these guys were concerned, they wanted us really to get to Kampala early. So they had to take us through the shortest cut, and that was through the game park. So we had the chance to go, go through the game park and just see the elephants, the amazing animals. It was really so nice. And I remember what Patrick said is that, you know what? Everything happens like for a reason, because these guys, maybe God knows that you guys are not going to come back here to Uganda soon, so you're not going to have the chance to see all these beautiful animals. So this car must break down so that you can have the chance to go through this. So I have
Yeah.
the belief that everything happens for a reason. Probably if it wasn't because of the war and starting from zero, Patrick, you wouldn't have that opportunity to come here to Canada. You
Mhm.
wouldn't have it at all. And just let's take it that way. It's okay to
Mhm.
start from zero. It's okay to just to it's okay for things to happen the way it is, and just believe
Mhm.
in yourself.
Mhm. Uh, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And
Mm.
honestly, I live by that.
Right,
Yeah, I live knowing that everything happens for a reason. Whether it being things that have happened to me or to others around me, I really look at it from that perspective, and I find it really refreshing when I look at it from that way. It changes how I approach the issue.
right,
Yeah, but about your experience, I know a lot of people will be listening and maybe watching this episode, and some of them might not really know what exactly it feels like to leave your home, to see someone you know being shot dead right there. Um, and you have to vacate your home. What is that important thing that someone needs to know about the experience of a refugee leaving his or her home country to move to a completely different place where they have to start afresh? Because I feel that sometimes the issues of refugees end up just being numbers that people just look at. But as we have heard from you, there's a huge story. There's a story not just of you, of those around you, and so forth, that is weaved in your refugee experience that people often don't get to see. They only just get to see the numbers.
Yeah.
oh yeah, I think there's really really so much that people need to understand about the life of being a refugee. you know i I never imagined living that experience until it happened to me. I just used to hear stories from my parents. I mean, my uncle and my mom. They could tell us stories of how they used to live in the refugee camp and all the challenges they were going through. But then in 2016, Patrick, I had the chance to also experience that life,
Right.
and it's a very very really uh, traumatizing life. It's so bad, and I feel that we shouldn't just look at these people as maybe displaced persons and just like people who don't have the time to stay in their home country or what. We should look at these people in a different way. These are people who, it's not that they're afraid maybe of fighting, but these are people who feel that it's okay to just leave what was happening there and then go somewhere so that you can have the platform of raising a generation that will come and fix things back home. We should look at such people as people who are not just like scared maybe of building up their where they're coming from, but just really being forced, like people who are being forced to go. It's not just their own interest that they really wants to leave their own country. If anyone ever comes to me and asks you that you want to leave your own country, I wouldn't accept that. But it is a kind of forced life, right? You have the experience, like you probably, different refugees have different stories. Others had to go through really hell, seeing someone being shot and seeing the blood coming out there. It is a lot. That moment stuck in your brain and will keep tormenting you for the rest of your life. Some of them have people that are so much dear to them, their parents, their mothers, their people that are really so much close to them. Most of them have seen these people disappearing when they are seen. And I think when we look at these people at that context where, um, in that context of them losing things that really feel so much to them, losing their moments, losing their memories, losing their parents, uh, their siblings or their relatives. When we look at refugees in that context, I think we would have like a different way of how we should handle them. Sometimes it feels so bad when we see how the refugees are being maybe treated. I know it's
Mhm.
not only
Mhm.
in Uganda, but we do have refugees like almost everywhere in the world. You know,
Right.
and the way how, sometimes I see these people being treated, it doesn't really it doesn't match the situation where they came from. I feel there is so much that needs to be done to these people. It's
Right.
good to understand the situation that they came from, right? And I feel that that's the thing. Like we should understand that these are not just normal people. These are people who have gone through hell. They have seen so much that probably no one in your family or no one in your entire generation has ever gone through. So when we look at them in that context, I think we'll be able to understand them better.
Yeah. We should see them as actual people,
Right.
Yeah,
not
not
as numbers.
statistics.
And by the way,
Yeah,
this some of the greatest mind, some of the greatest
Mhm.
mind that really I feel will have like the greatest mind that will actually have the solution to fix some of the mess that the world is going through are these refugees, right?
Right.
When you go through some situation, you have the experience of going through it, you develop like better strategies on how to fix things, right? And Patrick, I'm great that you are one of them. You left your country as well, you flee to Uganda, and just look at how the situation that you went in. Probably the reason why you started Saisi, it is because of your personal experience when you went
Right.
through, and you feel that it is really you just have you putting yourself in position of a fellow refugee, and you feel that there is need
Mhm.
to help that person, right? And that's what I'm
Absolutely.
saying, that if you are this kind of person, you have the better understanding of how to fix the community, on how to deal with the people. You probably develop
Mhm.
ideas on how such people can be handled, and that's why Ceci is doing great, helping so many people. It is because of your personal experience that probably you might have gone through. Yeah.
Right. Wow. That is really interesting. So you moved. You fled South Sudan in 2016,
Right.
and you stayed in Uganda until 2021,
Right.
uh, August. I'm just wondering, what during that time that you lived in Uganda, what was the thing you missed the most about home, and what was the thing that you grew to love the most about the new place that you were living in?
I think when one thing that I really missed so much when I was in Uganda, when I left home, is that there's that feeling of, like, when you always home, you have
Mhm.
that freedom, right? You just have that feeling that this is you, the feeling of ownership, right? Like you feel this is my place. I probably I do things with knowing that there is no one who is gonna maybe get I mean, angry with me. I can do this. Like the feeling of ownership was lacking when I was in Uganda. I was living. Uganda was really doing great. Like for us, uh, they provided us a place to live in, but I feel I still don't own that place where I was living in. Right, I have
Right.
no much memories attached to Uganda. I mean, my I didn't grow up in Uganda. My childhood memories were all back home, and that was something that I feel I was missing. That time where I could go with my childhood friends and just go and play soccer, and maybe go to Yei River and just go and swim there,
Hmm.
just close to us.
Yeah.
Those moments I feel were missing. Just
Yeah.
moments where we could walk like an hour to school and come back. Those moments I feel they were the one missing. But one thing that I get to love about Uganda, when I get to Uganda, I learn so many things, right? Especially you know um one thing I'll tell you that when I was in high school, I got to love, I mean, I get in so much love with politics. And um but I really, there was less, I was not exposed so much because I lived my entire life in South Sudan until from my when I was born until 2016. So I wasn't so much exposed to how the outside world probably maybe like behaves in terms of politics and other stuff.
Right.
So and there was no even room given in South Sudan because like the whole maybe of previous years were all in conflict, and there was no really chance to just go and see how things operates in the government. And like things are just like in a maze. It's hard
Right.
really to get things know in a systematic way. But when I came to Kampala, I realized the big difference. I realized how, like, so many people mostly complain that Uganda is a kind of like it's not so much democratic. I'm sorry, I'm getting us into politics again, but but it's just something that I love so much.
Yeah.
And I when I came to Uganda, I get so much exposed on how Uganda do their thing, and I realized that actually the way how Uganda does their thing is a little bit better than the one South Sudan do, though people don't appreciate it. But from my perspective, where I came from, where I have experienced how life is in South Sudan and how things operated, so I have realized that, like, I think there is something better here compared to home. And that thing,
Right.
I started getting that exposure. And also when I got that, I get into love and also like get to know about other countries, and I started saying that, okay, like this country is also doing better than Uganda in so many. I started to know that Kenya is better than Uganda in so many things again. You know, just like that love of like being exposed to so many things is one thing that I started to love it when I was in Uganda. I wasn't so much exposed to so many stuff when I was in South Sudan, but when I lived in Uganda, I get exposed to so many things. Yeah,
Right.
right,
Wow. That's really interesting. Yeah. And maybe before I hand over to Kimaru, uh, I wanted to because you have such a powerful story.
right,
Like, I am intrigued and inspired by it. It's powerful and lovely. Um, and I wanted to get your thoughts on identity changes
right,
that occur um, when you go to a new place, for example, as a refugee, right? Because I feel like sometimes that gets lost. For example, when people are having conversations around saying refugees should return back to South Sudan and things like that. And you probably remember this in Uganda. These conversations became a little bit prominent,
right,
uh, especially when the peace agreement was signed. These conversations even became more loud
right,
and pronounced, that people were being encouraged to go back to the country and something like that. Uh, but some were not, right? Because they had their identities have somehow evolved and changed during the time that they have stayed in the settlement. And I was just wondering, what do you think about like some of these changes? Because clearly from what you said, you yourself experienced those, yeah. To now how you see your role in politics, in the society, and and in the school, and the many roles you were taking up. Clearly, like, your stay um, in Uganda as a refugee significantly changed your identity a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think I feel that being a refugee, it's not like a fixed identity. I feel at some point, when you, of course, when you are displaced, you are a refugee. You go to another country, you become a refugee. But when in the process, you might see yourself evolving into something else. That's
Right.
my own perception. For instance, we do have some refugees that left South Sudan. They lived in Uganda, and maybe they've stayed there for quite long, and they have acquired Ugandan citizenship. So and at that point I feel, because refugee, I mean, being a refugee, I feel it's just like a legal status. I mean, like some status where it is legally provided, and at some point where, because there are also provisions where they can take out that status. For instance, if you
Hmm.
go back to the country where you come from, and at that point you lost that status. And but I feel that when I was in Uganda, most of the time I really, it's not that I don't want to identify as a refugee. Of course, I was, but the first and foremost, I identify myself as a South Sudanese, because that's the most important thing. You're
Right.
not going to be a refugee for the entire of your life. At some point, peace is going to come back, and you go back to your own country, and you still identify as a South Sudanese. So I I I've seen that evolve. I mean, like changing in my life, and but yeah, also I'm proud that at some point I identified as one, as a refugee, and that actually identify I mean that identity helped me to get so many things that helped me, that's changed my life. I had the chance to get into a refugee school and just complete my studies, because I had that status of being a refugee. I had the advantage and the privilege to get a scholarship and come here because I had that status. So I feel there's nothing really wrong identifying with being a refugee, and yeah, it just depends on how people feel about that. I've seen so many people who feel that identifying with that name, it's an insult, and just like they don't feel comfortable with it. But
Mm-hmm.
as I said, there's nothing bad at all with identifying being a refugee. Nothing.
Right. I thank you so much for sharing that. I feel that your story is a powerful example of one of my favorite authors. Says as if the going gets tough, the tough gets going.
That's true.
And uh, tough times never last, but tough people do. And I feel like you're really a very good example of that.
Right.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story.
No
Yeah,
problem. Cool.
yeah.
I think I have like two last questions for him. My first question would be like, how do you think, for example, now that you've gone through this whole experience, having that kind of intermittent education, or even seeing like kids at the refugee camp not accessing school for a while because of what was happening, how do you think like sort of the world can better support refugees and especially in accessing education?
Oh yeah. I think really I have a feeling that we shouldn't look at just like helping out when people turns to be refugees. But I feel the best thing the world can do is how we can solve situations that are going to make people get to be refugees. I feel that is the best. That's the one. One of the biggest thing that people have to do. You know, there's so many like situations right now in the world that are just like a timing bomb, and at some point I feel they're
Mm,
just going to explode, and it's really going to create some refugee crisis. And if the world is at all like so much concerned about helping people, they shouldn't look at helping them when they become refugees, right? We should
Yeah,
get into solving all these issues that have the potential of making people to be refugees. That's one thing. Could be
mm,
if there are issues like conflict. How do we get to know? I mean, how do we maybe make sure that there's no conflict emerging in these countries? How do we solve all these things that make, like, all this? I feel that is the primary thing that the world need to focus on. It's much, it's less expensive to spend on preventive ways than to actually supporting refugees. Like, it is, we can do that, right? Like,
Yeah.
get countries, get people believe in ways that are not going to create conflict, make people settle, and that's the best way, I feel.
Okay.
Right.
Wow, that's really amazing. Yeah, conflict resolution at where there is, that specific point before it happens, not after it happens. That's amazing. And also, the other thing would be if you could go back to sort of your younger self before all this happened, like everything changed and the war happened, what would you say to yourself?
um I really think that I feel that, like, every moment of one's life,
Mhm.
it happens, as I said before, it happens for a reason. I think there's nothing to regret about your childhood. There's nothing to regret about any mistake you've done in your life. you know it's just okay, just for things to happen the way they're happening. There's nothing to regret at all. Every challenge that you face, every mistake you have made in life, it's a learning point, and there is nothing to regret about it. Probably some of us are maybe successful today because of the mistakes they made before, and they learn from those mistakes. That's why they have made a very strong commitment that they want to see things different. There's nothing to regret about your past. There's nothing to regret at all about what happened in your past. If you didn't have the chance to maybe go through the best life, to live the best life, there's nothing to worry about it. And that just happens for a reason. And yeah, nothing to regret about it.
Wow, that's lovely. Yeah. As we wind up, um, what is the best advice you've ever received that keeps uh that sparks and sustains your drive for growth? You are a very passionate individual. I admire your passion.
Thanks, Patrick.
Yeah.
um I think the greatest advice that I've always received, it's from my uncle. And what my uncle always tells me is that, uh we we didn't go to school. We didn't go to the best school. We didn't probably live in the best houses. We didn't drive the most expensive cars. But everything that we have not achieved, we are carrying it to you. And all you need to do is just get focused, and everything is gonna get to you. Like, it's a kind of like blessing, when someone gives you that kind of blessing, and just like believing in you, believing in whatever thing
Right.
you do, like, it keeps you going. So that trust alone, that hope that he has on me, like, I feel gives me it keeps me going every single day. And I feel that's the best thing. And most times when I just feel that I want to give up on so many things, I just recall those things that maybe my uncle told me. We didn't have this, we didn't go to the best school, but you must make sure that maybe your siblings or your kids are not going to go through the same life that you went through, right? So that's the thing that most times just keep me going, because I feel that the thing that I've not that my parents did not earn should just stop with them, right? I feel I need to make sure that the people that are going to come after me are going to live the desired life. And that's what really makes me sometimes just get up. If I feel like I'm tired of doing something, if I feel like I want to give up on doing something, just I remind those words, and I was like, I think I have a role to play. There's a big role ahead of me. Right.
Building a better generation.
Right.
Powerful.
Hey. Honestly, this has been amazing. Thank you so much, Emmanuel, for sharing your story. It shows it's very inspiring, and it shows a lot of resilience. And also, even before we wind up, I would like to give a big shout out to your mother and your uncle. They've
Thanks a
come
lot.
up a lot in this episode. Honestly, I feel like we all need that
Yes.
sort of support system. So, to your mother and your uncle and your community that has been there for you throughout this journey, a big shout out from the Sparkit podcast. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Helen and Patrick.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you for showing up on the Sparkit podcast. We have enjoyed listening to your story, and I hope it does sort of speak to someone out there. It does give somebody hope because clearly you rebuilt definitely from scratch at some point in your life, and here you are. You're making like really big and bold steps towards the right direction for your life and for your community. I hope it does inspire them to also take some action in their own lives. And yeah, Patrick, do you have anything else you would like to add?
What I would want to say is thank you for sharing your powerful story with us. You've shown us that anything is possible with the determination, ambition, and working hard and having faith in God.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
All right, so if this episode sparked something in you, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with somebody who needs a little inspiration. And for our viewers and listeners, follow us on all social media platforms at the Sparkit Podcast. See you next time on the Sparkit Podcast.
Cool.
Bye bye.
Bye. That's
Yeah.
perfect.